N.
That was just Levert, Sweat and Gill.
It was not.
No, that was T.
I can't.
TG. That was just TGT, the greatest hits.
Yeah, one song.
I can't. Yo, they had a whole album, son. They had a whole album, son. Leave my people alone. But I can't. Okay, so I want to shout out Scott Surgeon for hooking us up with DJ E-Class today. We read the last hour, and I didn't have anybody. Everybody that I knew was a DJ was like unavailable. They were in Myrtle Beach, and that's a shout out to Cookie. Shabu's in New York, you know, like everybody want to be gone. So Sir Jam came through and was like, yo, text this one, he's coming. So shout out to Scott. But now I would like to introduce everyone to the Kelly Square 4. We're going to have them introduce themselves, name, and then we'll get into our discussion. So welcome. Who's going to go first? Looks like Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Kevin Kusen. I'm glad to be part of this group.
Sonia Connor.
Julius Jones.
And then the fourth member is?
Bobby Beers.
And he's not here today. So I'm going to let my co-host Will start with the first question.
All right, so what happened? How did you guys become known as the Kelly Square 4?
With the quotations and everything.
Yeah, the quotations and everything.
Yeah, so basically last year around this time, MLK Day, we organized a protest in Kelly Square where we took Kelly Square for 4.5 minutes. And then we blocked the street and held the square for 4.5 minutes in honor of Mike Brown being laid out in the street for 4.5 hours in Ferguson. And it was part of a national coordinated effort of actions, of direct actions across the country. And while we were out there, there's a video out there that folks can check out. But not only did we take the square, but we also had people running up to the cars with flyers and engaging folks about why we were out there. So it was like a two-part thing.
Okay.
All right, so what was the result of that? Did anything happen? Did you guys, are you guys in court over it? Or, because I saw the video. And there was some upset people that were honking their horns, driving up. And then I saw that you guys let an ambulance go by, right? And then as soon as another car tried to sneak, how some cars try to, how Worcester drives, they try to sneak right up on the bumper. And it was like, nah, they walked right back in front of it and stopped it. And then they didn't let it go. So was that a violation of anything? Or was there anything that happened in result of that?
Yeah, well, we've been charged with, first we were charged with disturbing the peace and disorderly conduct, and then the disorderly conduct charge was dropped, and now we're facing a disturbing the peace charge.
And just to add, there were about 40 protesters out there, so there were
Right.
only 4 people charged.
Right.
So it's likely that the 4 people who were charged were probably targeted because there were ways to find out who other people were.
Okay. So, and have they asked you guys names of anybody else? Were they looking to try to, obtain information about the other people that were out there that were doing it?
No, it's clear that City Manager Ed Augustus sought out to make a deal with the group and said that if you don't protest in the street, then we won't press charges. And then when that deal was rejected, that was when the charges came out about a month or 5 or 6 weeks after the event.
Okay. So why did you reject the deal?
I mean, actually, that's kind of like a form of extortion. You can't make deals. It's actually out of your jurisdiction as city manager to make such a deal. It's either against the law or it isn't. You either are doing it to enforce the law or you're not.
Right.
But in this case, it wasn't about enforcing the law. It wasn't about public safety as was being touted by people. And we knew that to be the case. And quite frankly, there's no way that any of us can say on behalf of any other person,
Right.
Yes or no, this person is or is not going to exercise his First Amendment right to exercise freedom of speech. We can't make such a deal. And it's pretty astonishing that the city manager would do such a thing.
Okay. So you guys are currently fighting it in court now?
Yeah, we actually have our trial date this Thursday and Friday
Oh.
at the Worcester Courthouse.
Okay, that's a Oh, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate the question, Will, but I also think that when we ask this question, we move away from the real question. It's not about why we accepted the deal. It's about why did the city manager make such a deal? How is that even within his jurisdiction to make such deals? That's the question that's not being asked that I think should be asked more often.
Okay, so why did he offer to? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna ask you that. No, but okay. So what happened with Mike Brown was crazy to me when looking on the news and showing his body there, and it's like my kids even walk by the computer screen like, "Who's that? Why is he laying there like that?" You know, it was crazy that stuff like that is happening. Do you think since then anything has improved in terms of relations between people of color and the situations that's going on, race relations, or even justice relations in terms of the way certain people are treated?
I think that's a tricky question. Certainly, there has been a lot more legal pressure on police departments across the United States to implement changes, but at the same time, there's been also a rash of violence against Black people that has gone unpunished, just like the Tamir Rice case, which happened around the same time, and the officers were just not indicted. Race relations in the United States has a scattered, broken history. And right now, we're in a phase, I think you can see that with the Black Lives Matter movement, where the issue is coming up and it's being highlighted because of all of these videos that are coming out.
Right.
But the truth is that violence has been occurring ever since we got here.
Right.
And it hasn't stopped. And now the public attention has been swerved on and people are paying attention to it because it's unavoidable. And because Black folks all across the country are standing up and saying this is not right again, just like we had to the whole time we've been here.
Okay, so are you guys, I mean, I know you guys are known as the Kelly Square Four, but are you associated with Black Lives Matter, or are you guys is it a Worcester organization that you guys are, where you're dealing with the race relations even in Worcester? Because, I mean, things like that happen, and there are complaints and issues of police brutality, the way police treat people of color in the city of Worcester. Are you guys associated with them?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of that. I think some of us have direct affiliations and are members of Black Lives Matter. Other of us are allies and just want to be part of this. Again, it was over 40 of us that turned out that day because we felt something needed to be said, and we thought people needed to stop for 4.5 minutes and at least think about it for those 4.5 minutes. I want to take us back to the previous question just a little bit. I think when you ask that question, you need to ask it 3 times. You need to ask it, have things changed across the country, have things changed in the state, and have things changed in Worcester.
Right.
And it's important that we ask all 3 of those questions because that's the dialogue we're seeking to create. And when we stopped the traffic in Kelly Square, it was because we wanted to have that conversation here in Worcester. We didn't feel that conversation. We were supporting the nationwide effort, but we wanted to make sure that conversation was happening in Worcester. And unfortunately, my guess is all of us would feel that we haven't really made a lot of progress in Worcester with that conversation. There was this faint effort at these race dialogues with the Department of Justice that were afraid to talk about race, frankly. And then there was supposed to be follow-up to that, and it's been delayed. Beyond that, it's hard to point to anything that's actually changed in the city of Worcester because of the issues being raised by Black Lives Matter across the country and elsewhere. Big event right there was the Officer Monica and other police officers beating up somebody right in the jail cells in Worcester, and that whole thing got hushed up. And apparently some officers were let go, what have you, but all of that information has been locked up. No one can see it. Folks have asked to see the videotapes of what happened. The city police chief's refusing to release the videotape of that incident. So we're not having an open and transparent dialogue here. We're not making changes. Things are pretty much the status quo in Worcester.
And I would add that in addition, I think they've actually worsened a bit in Worcester. If you look at the assault on Black and brown children in schools that have happened post the MLK Day rally, post, all this happening over the past year, and we see actually more of an effort to assault Black and brown people in Worcester. So I'd argue that it's gotten worse.
Okay.
Hold on. I want to know, why do you think they targeted the 4 of you and not the other people?
I'm not exactly sure what the city manager's thinking was, or I'm not really sure anything about the city manager. But I would guess that they chose us for optics. They chose people who were on the older end of the spectrum, who, if we were, and we have been, harangued, because I don't know if people understand, but when you have an open case, even if it's just it's not a felony, it's just a misdemeanor, right? And the maximum penalty is a $150 fine, right? So we won't face any jail time. But at the same time that this case is open, if you get picked up for anything else whatsoever, then you immediately go to jail, because you have an open case and then you have another open case. So it's like you must be up to something. So if you get this double charge, then you immediately go to jail. So what it effectively does is ISIS people who would potentially put themselves in arrestable situations from doing it, because you would immediately go to jail.
See, my thing is I'm not understanding what they arrested you for. Was there an arrest?
No, we didn't even get arrested. We got summonses.
Okay, so I'm not 100% sure as to what the charge is. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't add up. Like, it's not making sense to me. Like, okay, so you did the peaceful protest, right?
And the cops were there. The cops were there. They saw us. They let us go that day.
Okay. And then how long after the protest was the charge?
Had to be 5 or 6 weeks. Yeah.
Weeks.
Huh. That doesn't make sense to me. Like, I'm like,
It doesn't.
and I know how to add, but that's not adding up to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense because even though Julius didn't say it this way, I personally, I think it was about retaliation. I think that it was also an effort. The idea was that the 4 of us were identified as some of the folks who have been leaders and organizers of the previous protests that had taken place over the months, the months leading up to that. There have been many protests, much longer protests. Protests that where we were blocking, there were people blocking streets for longer periods of time. And I think the real attempt was, if we could get, a few of these people. I think there was also some retaliation towards some of us for some previous action. So I think the idea was that if we can target these particular people and make examples of them, and or make deals with them to get them to talk to everyone else about not blocking streets, that we could make this stop. We want this to stop in Worcester. There's basically there's an effort to silence all resistance when you're speaking out against racism, particularly anti-Black racism.
And I think it's important to say that when the government has a 2-part role. One, they have to deal with the racism that's in our midst that we're highlighting, right? But they also have to deal with the angry white backlash. And what this is, the race dialogues could be seen as a poor attempt by the city to deal with racism. And then this whole trial and everything that's happened in relation to it can be seen as Manager Augustus's attempt to manage white backlash. Because if he's seen as quote unquote weak, and since he's buying into that patriarchal model, if he's seen as weak, then he will be seen as not respected. And so he has to be quote unquote tough on these criminals.
See, but it still doesn't add up to me, and it doesn't make sense, because you figure you have somebody that is a professor, right?
Correct.
You have a community organizer, right? You have somebody that owns a nonprofit, correct? Or used to?
Participating.
Okay. And then you have, what does Bobby do?
He's been organizing.
Okay, he was an organizer as well. So it's like, where would that, like, I would understand if they were trying to, like, if it was a cop in the mix, right? So say Julius was a cop, and then he's like, oh, you know what, I'm going to take this one to prove a point. That even the law doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, that kind of makes a little more sense to me than it does to just pick out you 4.
So in some of the previous protests, Bobby and I in particular, they knew exactly who we were. We had come face to face with the chief of police and other police officers. So I do think that there was an
So they knew you.
They knew it, and I think there was some assumptions made about Julius organizing that protest. There were just assumptions made about who were the organizers and who were the leaders.
Okay.
And I think, if I know this is definitely, I can think about the way that I handled my case in particular as an example of how we were actually targeted. It wasn't that they said that their rationale was we were the only people they identified, that they knew.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, that's their rationale. These were the only people that we were able to identify that we knew. But that's not actually the case, which I think will come out later, because I think we were targeted.
Okay.
I can see why they were targeted too, because there's a lot of media that went out against it. I'm not starting with it. I'm just saying it. It was a lot of media that went out against them when it came to their efforts, to protest and the rights of African Americans. It was just, it was like easy to pick or make an example out of those names. When you see those names coming up,
Sonia Connors is not black. Kevin Cassan is not black.
Nope.
Julius Jones is black.
Right.
So, explain.
Because in the media that was bringing them out, they were still brought up in it, and still are even to this day. The same, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's not exactly a coincidence that the people that were charged were also the targets of Turtle Bigot.
Thank you for saying
He
slap.
is a bit of
I'm gonna slap fire out of Mike in a minute. So yes, they're talking about. Yeah, go ahead. I just don't like giving praise to people that don't need it. You know what I mean? So it's
I
like
understand.
saying his name is giving him props at the
No,
end of the day. But this one over
I
here.
think it's important to say that Turtle Bigot is a bigot, right? And that he is puppeteering city council in a lot of ways, and that he is the voice of the white backlash. He is the angry white backlash, and he encapsulates that. And people who follow his message rap with that. They roll with that. That's their like MO. And his voice, as I think of him as like maybe our local Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying?
Oh
Where
my God.
you think he's like ridiculous. You like when you hear what he says.
Yeah.
You hear what he says.
Yeah.
You hear what he says, and it's just so ridiculous. It doesn't even make any sense. But then you see that there's so many people who agree with him that it's actually kind of scary.
And on that note, we're going to take a pause for the cause, y'all. You're listening to the Positive Impact Show, Flavor 105.5 FM. E-Class.